The skies above Earth roared with fire as Zarkothan warships blotted out the sun. The metallic behemoths unleashed relentless volleys of plasma bombs, carving deep scars into the planet's surface. Cities burned, their spires crumbling under the force of the alien barrage. For the first time in centuries, humanity faced an enemy determined to wipe them from existence. Deep within an underground bunker on the outskirts of what was once New Geneva, Commander Elena Drake stood in tense silence. The dim light of the command center cast shadows across her sharp features. Her eyes, unblinking, were fixed on the screen in front of her. It displayed the carnage above, a real-time feed of Earth's destruction captured by the last operational satellites. "They're turning our cities into ash," said Marcus, her second in command, his voice heavy with anger. "Millions are." He stopped short, unable to finish. Elena's jaw tightened. "I know." The room buzzed with muted activity as the resistance scrambled to process the scale of the attack. Engineers monitored systems, analysts tracked Zarkothan troop movements, and medics prepared for the inevitable flood of injured survivors. Despite the chaos, an unnatural stillness hung over the team. The Zarkothans had taken humanity by surprise, and for the moment, they were winning. "Commander!" a voice called from across the room. It was Sarah Lorne, the lead systems analyst. She pointed to a glowing marker on her monitor. "Their fleet has established an orbital formation. It's defensive, but their flagship is sitting right in the center. It's practically daring us to try something." Elena's lips curved into a humorless smile. "Arrogant bastards. They think we're already beaten. Can you blame them?" Marcus muttered. "They've got ships the size of cities, and we're hiding in the dirt." Elena turned to face him, her expression sharp. "Let them think that. Overconfidence is a weakness we can exploit." Marcus raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He knew better than to question her when she was like this, focused, cold, and entirely unshakable. "Pull up the prototype," Elena ordered. Sarah hesitated. "Commander, you don't mean—" "I do," Elena said, her tone brooking no argument. "Pull it up." With a few keystrokes, Sarah brought up a schematic of Earth's last experimental weapon, the Nemesis Pulse. It was an energy-based system designed to disable enemy fleets in a single strike. Theoretically, it could knock out an entire armada by overloading their systems. Practically, it had never been tested. The risks were enormous. Using it could drain Earth's remaining power reserves, crippling critical infrastructure. "The Nemesis Pulse was never meant to be activated," Sarah said, her voice wavering. "It's unstable. If it backfires—" "It won't," Elena cut in. "It's our only shot." Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Elena, you're talking about gambling everything we have left on a weapon that could fry us along with them." She met his gaze, unflinching. "What's the alternative? Wait for them to finish us off? We don't have time to debate. Either we use it, or we lose everything." The room fell silent. The weight of the decision pressed down on everyone, but no one dared to argue further. They trusted Elena, even when her choices seemed impossible. Sarah finally nodded. "We'll need about an hour to charge the system and align the targeting array. And we'll need to shut down all non-essential systems to power it." "Do it," Elena said without hesitation. "And bring me the targeting data for their flagship. If we're going to hit them, we're going to make it count." Above ground, the Zarkothan fleet continued its assault, their strikes systematic and merciless. On the bridge of the Zarkothan flagship, High Admiral Krezix lounged in his command chair, watching the destruction unfold on a holographic display. The planet's surface was a patchwork of smoke and fire, its once glistening cities reduced to rubble. "Pathetic," Krezix sneered, his voice a deep rumble. "These humans call themselves resilient. All I see is chaos and weakness." One of his officers approached, bowing slightly. "Admiral, we've detected no significant resistance. Their forces are scattered, their infrastructure failing. Victory is assured." "Of course it is," Krezix replied, his tendrils curling in satisfaction. "Send a transmission to their remaining governments. Let them know their end is inevitable. The officer hesitated. Admiral, we're picking up a strange energy signature from the planet's surface. It's faint, but growing. Krezix's eyes narrowed. What kind of signature? Unknown, the officer admitted. It's centered near the largest concentration of underground human activity. Possibly some kind of weapon. Krezix laughed, a deep, resonant sound. A weapon? From these primitives? Let them try. It will make their defeat all the sweeter. In the bunker, tension was at its peak. The lights flickered as non-essential systems were shut down, every ounce of power rerouted to the Nemesis pulse. The hum of the charging coils filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. Targeting array locked, Sarah reported, her fingers flying over the console. We're ready. Elena stood at the center of the room, her eyes fixed on the countdown timer. Marcus, status on the fleet? They're holding formation, Marcus replied. Completely exposed. They're not taking us seriously. They will, Elena said, her voice ice cold. She turned to Sarah. Initiate the sequence. Sarah's hands hovered over the controls for a moment, her hesitation visible. Then, with a deep breath, she pressed the activation command. High above, the Zarkothan fleet was suddenly bathed in an eerie light as the Nemesis pulse activated. The energy wave rippled through space, invisible to the naked eye but devastating in its effects. One by one, the Zarkothan ships began to falter. Their lights flickered, their engines sputtered, and their weapons systems went offline. On the bridge of the flagship, alarms blared as consoles shorted out in showers of sparks. Krezix leapt to his feet, his smug confidence replaced with rage. What is happening? He roared. Admiral, the energy wave, it's disabling our systems, an officer shouted. The fleet is crippled. Krezix's tendrils writhed in fury. How? How could they? Before he could finish, a transmission crackled through the ship's comms. The screen flickered, and a human woman's face appeared, Commander Elena Drake. Her gaze was steady, her voice calm and deadly. You bombed us? She said. Adorable. Watch this. The aftermath of the Nemesis pulse rippled through the Zarkothan fleet like a tidal wave. Ships floated aimlessly in orbit, their systems flickering or completely dark. On Earth, cheers erupted within the Resistance bunker as the monitors displayed the chaos above. For the first time since the invasion, humanity had struck a blow that mattered. Commander Elena Drake's gaze didn't waver from the screen, even as her team celebrated around her. We've disabled them, she said, her voice cutting through the noise. But we haven't stopped them. We move now. The cheering faded as reality set in. Marcus Reyes stepped forward, his expression grim. They'll recover, Elena. Their flagship is massive. Even with the pulse, it's probably running auxiliary systems by now. You're talking about hitting them while they're still a wounded beast. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Elena replied. Wounded beasts are dangerous, but they're also vulnerable. We've got one shot to finish this before they regroup. Marcus hesitated, but the determination in her eyes left no room for argument. What's the plan? He asked. Elena gestured to the schematic of the Zarkothan flagship, now displayed on the main console. We're taking a team on board. Their communications are down, their defenses are crippled, and their crew is in disarray. We disable their command systems and force a retreat. You mean infiltrate the flagship? Sarah Lorne, the systems analyst, looked incredulous. It's crawling with Zarkothan troops. They'll still have functional security measures. They won't expect us to come to them, Elena said. That's our advantage. Within an hour, the infiltration team was assembled. A small group of elite fighters and engineers, armed with experimental tech and years of survival experience. They boarded a retrofitted stealth craft designed to evade detection even by advanced Zarkothan sensors. Marcus sat in the cockpit, piloting with a steady hand as the ship ascended through the atmosphere. The journey was silent except for the hum of the engines. Tension hung in the air, heavy and oppressive. Elena sat near the front, her weapon resting across her lap. She was going over the mission details in her mind, calculating every variable, every risk. Marcus broke the silence. "You're awfully quiet for someone about to storm an alien flagship." Elena smirked faintly. "Just thinking about how to make them regret bombing us." "That's the spirit," Marcus replied, though his tone was subdued. He glanced at her. "You ever think about what happens if we don't make it back?" She didn't hesitate. "I don't plan on not making it back." Her certainty was enough to quiet him. The rest of the team, seated further back, exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. They all knew the risks. They all knew the odds. But they trusted Elena, and that trust was enough to carry them forward. As they approached the Zarkothan flagship, the scale of the vessel became apparent. It loomed ahead like a metallic fortress, its surface bristling with turrets and hangar bays. Most of its lights were dim, but a few flickered ominously, a sign that auxiliary power was slowly restoring vital systems. "We're in their blind spot," Marcus reported, guiding the ship toward a docking hatch on the lower hull. "No signs of detection." "Good," Elena said. "Get us in and stay on standby. Once we're inside, we're on our own." The stealth craft docked with a barely audible hiss. Elena led the team through the airlock, her movements precise and deliberate. The corridor beyond was dark and silent, the hum of a once efficient warship reduced to a faint, irregular drone. "Stay sharp," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of their footsteps. "They'll have sentries, even in this state." They moved in a tight formation, navigating the labyrinthine halls of the flagship. The walls were lined with alien symbols that glowed faintly, casting eerie patterns on the metallic floor. The air was cold and stale, a stark contrast to the chaos they'd left on Earth. The first encounter came quickly. A patrol of Zarkothan soldiers rounded a corner, their weapons drawn but their movements sluggish. They were clearly disoriented, their systems likely affected by the pulse. Elena raised her hand, signaling for silence. "Take them quietly," she mouthed. Two of her team members moved with practiced efficiency, taking down the patrol before they could raise an alarm. The Zarkothans collapsed without a sound, their weapons clattering softly to the floor. "Move!" Elena ordered, her voice low. They advanced deeper into the ship, avoiding heavily guarded areas and focusing on their target, the command center. Along the way, they encountered more resistance, but the team's training and the Zarkothans' disarray gave them the upper hand. Each skirmish was over in moments, the humans pressing forward with relentless determination. When they reached the command center, it was heavily fortified. A reinforced door blocked their path, and the sounds of movement inside suggested that the Zarkothans were regrouping. Sarah stepped forward, her tools already in hand. "I can bypass the lock, but it's going to take a few minutes." "You've got two," Elena said, positioning the team for a potential breach. "Marcus, watch our flank. Everyone else, cover Sarah." The moments stretched into eternity as Sarah worked, her fingers flying over the alien interface. Behind her, the team stood ready, their weapons aimed at the corridor. Every distant sound, a faint clang, a distant hum, set their nerves on edge. Finally, Sarah stepped back. "It's done." Elena nodded. "Breach on my mark. 3, 2, 1. The door slid open, and chaos erupted. The command center was a hive of activity, Zarkothan officers barking orders as they struggled to bring systems back online. The humans stormed in, their weapons blazing. The Zarkothans fought back fiercely, their desperation evident, but the humans had the element of surprise. Elena moved with precision, cutting through the chaos to reach the central console. "Sarah, get over here!" she shouted. "Shut them down!" Sarah sprinted to the console, her tools already out. As she worked, Elena and the rest of the team held off the remaining Zarkothans, their movements a coordinated dance of fire and cover. "I need 30 seconds," Sarah called out. "You've got 10," Elena replied, firing at a Zarkothan officer who had taken aim at Sarah. The seconds dragged on, each one a battle in itself. Finally, Sarah shouted, "Done!" The command center's systems went dark as Sarah executed the final command. The ship shuddered, its power core destabilizing. Alarms blared, signaling imminent failure. "Time to go!" Elena ordered. The team fought their way back to the stealth craft, the ship's systems collapsing around them. Explosions rocked the halls, and fire spread through the corridors. By the time they reached the airlock, the Zarkothan flagship was on the verge of total destruction. Marcus fired up the engines as the team scrambled aboard. "Hold on!" he shouted as the ship broke free from the docking hatch. They barely cleared the flagship before it erupted in a brilliant explosion, fragments of the once mighty vessel scattering into the void. Cheers erupted in the cockpit, but Elena's expression remained serious. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "But it's a start." As the stealth craft descended toward Earth, the team looked out at the stars, their victory a beacon of hope in the darkness. The explosion of the Zarkothan flagship lit up the void of space like a miniature sun, its fiery remnants cascading across the dark expanse. On board the stealth craft, the resistance team let out a collective cheer. For a brief moment, the weight of their fight lifted as the seemingly indomitable alien warship crumbled into nothingness. Commander Elena Drake, however, sat silently at the cockpit, her eyes scanning the readouts. The flagship's destruction was a victory, but the fight wasn't over. Earth's survival still hung by a thread. "Status report," she said, her voice steady. Marcus Reyes, seated at the controls, glanced at the monitors. "The flagship is gone, but the rest of their fleet is still up there. Their smaller ships are regrouping. Looks like they're scrambling to establish a new chain of command." Elena nodded, her jaw tightening. "They'll recover faster than we'd like. And once they do, they'll come for us." Sarah Lorne, still catching her breath after the infiltration, leaned against the wall. "The Nemesis post disabled most of their systems. Shouldn't we have some time?" "Not enough," Elena said. "We need to hit them again while they're vulnerable." As the stealth craft descended back into Earth's atmosphere, the team's mood shifted from celebration to urgency. The comms system buzzed with updates from the resistance bunker. Zarkothan ships were repositioning above Earth, their movements erratic but growing more organized. Even crippled, the fleet still posed a significant threat. Inside the bunker, chaos reigned. Engineers worked frantically to bring critical systems back online, while medics tended to the injured from earlier strikes. The once celebratory atmosphere had shifted into one of grim determination. Elena stepped into the command center, her presence immediately commanding attention. The room fell silent as she approached the central console. "Give me options," she said, addressing the assembled team. An engineer spoke first. "The orbital satellites are still operational, but their energy reserves are depleted. We might get one more coordinated strike before they're completely offline." Sarah frowned. "One strike isn't enough. They've still got at least 24 ships in orbit. We'll need something more decisive." Elena's eyes narrowed as she studied the tactical map. The remnants of the Zarkothan fleet were clustered near Earth's upper atmosphere, a sign of their regrouping efforts. She pointed to a highlighted section of the map. "Their formation is tight, but that works to our advantage," she said. "If we target their core ships, the destruction will destabilize the rest of the fleet." Marcus crossed his arms. "You're suggesting we detonate something big enough to take out multiple ships in one go?" Elena's expression was grim. "Exactly." The plan that emerged was both daring and desperate. The Resistance had a cache of antimatter warheads, dangerous, unstable weapons that had been deemed too risky to use in previous battles. Elena proposed using one of these warheads to strike the core of the Zarkothan formation. The blast would create a chain reaction, crippling the fleet. "Antimatter?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with both awe and concern. "If this goes wrong..." "It won't," Elena said firmly. "We don't have the luxury of second-guessing. This is our best shot." The room was silent for a moment before Marcus stepped forward. "How do we deliver it?" "We can't launch it from the surface. They'll intercept it before it reaches them." Elena's eyes met his. "We'll have to take it up ourselves." Preparations were swift and methodical. The stealth craft was modified to carry the warhead, its interior reinforced to handle the payload's instability. Elena and Marcus would pilot the craft, while Sarah stayed behind to guide them from the bunker. As they suited up, Marcus glanced at Elena. "This is the part where I ask if you're sure about this," he said, his tone light but his expression serious. Elena smirked faintly. "And this is the part where I tell you to stop asking stupid questions." "Fair enough." The launch was seamless. The stealth craft soared through the atmosphere, its engines humming softly. From her seat, Elena watched the Zarkothan fleet grow larger on the view screen. The warhead sat securely in the cargo bay, its ominous glow a reminder of the stakes. "Approaching the target zone," Marcus reported. "No signs they've detected us yet." "Good," Elena said. "Let's keep it that way." The stealth craft maneuvered into position, weaving through the debris field left by the destroyed flagship. The Zarkothan ships loomed ahead, their angular forms casting long shadows across the stars. Inside the Zarkothan command ship, chaos still reigned. Officers barked orders, trying to re-establish order amid the confusion. High Admiral Krezix, now on board a smaller cruiser, seethed with fury. The destruction of the flagship had been a humiliating blow, and the human's defiance only fueled his rage. "Status update," he snarled. An officer hesitated. "The fleet is regrouping, Admiral. But we've detected a small craft near the perimeter, unknown signature." Krezix's tendrils twitched. "A human craft?" "Unconfirmed, but likely." Krezix's expression darkened. "Destroy it." The first warning came as the stealth craft's sensors lit up. "They've spotted us," Marcus said, his hands tightening on the controls. "Hold course," Elena replied. "We're almost there." The Zarkothan ships opened fire, their plasma turrets lighting up the void. Marcus piloted with precision, weaving through the incoming fire. The craft shook violently as a near miss sent a shockwave rippling through it. "We're not going to last long at this rate," Marcus shouted. "We don't have to," Elena said. She activated the targeting system, locking onto the core of the Zarkothan formation. "Deploying the warhead. Get us clear." Marcus hit the release mechanism, and the warhead dropped from the craft, its trajectory locked. Alarms blared as the Zarkothan fleet detected the incoming threat, but it was too late. The warhead reached the center of the formation and detonated in a brilliant flash. The resulting explosion was catastrophic. A chain reaction tore through the Zarkothan ships, their power cores overloading and erupting one after another. The once mighty fleet disintegrated in moments, leaving only fragments behind. Inside the stealth craft, Elena and Marcus watched the destruction unfold. For the first time, Marcus allowed himself a grin. "You did it." "No," Elena said, her expression softening. "We did it." Back on Earth, the bunker erupted into cheers as the monitors displayed the fleet's destruction. For the first time since the invasion, humanity had not only survived but triumphed. Elena and Marcus returned to Earth as heroes, but Elena remained grounded. As she addressed the resistance, her voice carried the weight of both their struggles and their victory. "They thought we were weak," she said. "They thought they could crush us without consequence. Today, we showed them who we are. We are humanity. And no one takes our home from us." The room erupted in applause, but Elena's gaze remained fixed on the horizon. The Zarkothans had underestimated humanity once. They wouldn't make that mistake again, but neither would humanity. Earth would be ready. "You said?"